Hey everybody, Vince August here. It is Friday, July 10th. And one of the things that I've noticed is that certain salons and places, when you go indoors, now can ask questions and take temperatures and do things to decide if they want to let you in. And listen, I get it. We want to keep everybody safe but I just think that there's a potential for abuse here based on something that happened to me yesterday. I don't know if this has happened to anyone else. So I went to a salon to get waxing. Look, it's summer, it's hot, and there's just certain places I don't like body hair. Regardless of how little it is, I don't like hair on my back. I don't like hair on my ears, those little fuzzy things. I don't like hair on my hands. I don't like looking at my hands, feeling like I should be dancing with Belle while Mrs. Potts sings Beauty and the Beast. So there's just certain places I want to have groomed and cleaned up or whatever. And look, I just feel I wasn't treated the same. I'll give you an example. The woman in front of me, they took her temperature. She was 98.1. They said, have you experienced any coronavirus-like symptoms? She's like, no. Has anybody in your house been diagnosed with coronavirus? They're like, no. They're like, have you been tested? And she's like, no, I haven't, but, I haven't coughed, sneezed. And they were like, okay, go ahead, go in. And I was like, all right, this is fair. This seems fair, and I have no problem in answering these questions. So they took my temperature, 97.9. It was fine. And they're like, all right, so we have to ask you these questions. I'm like, go ahead. And they're like, have you had any coronavirus-like symptoms, coughing, sneezing, chest come down? And I'm like, no. And they're like, sir, you have to let us finish the question. So I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought, and they're like, yeah, in the last 3 to 5 years. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. It just started in November. I thought you meant, and they're like, no, sir, you have to answer the question we asked. It's last, and I'm like, well, I'm sure I've coughed or something or sneezed in the last 3 to 5 years. And they're like, oh, okay. And, I was like, it doesn't seem like the same question you just, like, sir, we have to ask. And I'm like, okay, go ahead. And they're like, have you traveled to any of the states on the do not travel list? And I'm like, no, I've been on lockdown really all year. And they're like, sir, again, you have to let us ask the full question. I'm like, okay, go ahead. Have you been to like Florida, Texas, California, since 2010? And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. What do you mean? Since the last decade? I'm like, of course I travel. And they're like, all right, listen, we have to have a journal. We have to know what we're dealing with here. So they're like, so that's, not a good answer. And I'm like, look, if you don't want to do the service, they're like, this has nothing to do with that. They're like, can you please let us ask? I'm like, fine, ask your questions. And they're like, they go, some of these are going to be more difficult than others to ask people because they're personal. But, with regards to your health, have you gained any weight since the last time you were here? And I'm like, okay, look, yeah, I've gained weight, man. I think we've all kind of put on a couple pounds. They're like, sir, a couple, is that your answer? I'm like, all right, 10, fine, 10. And the woman looked at me, she's like, I'm going to put down 12. And I was like, really? Really? Are we doing this? Finally, the next question blew my mind. She's like, all right, look, there's 2 left. I got to ask these. Who won the World Series in 1957? I'm like, all right, look, this has nothing to do with coronavirus. You just don't want me to come in. You don't want to perform the service. That's fine. I'll go. Sir, no matter what, when you come, and I'm like, okay, fine. And for some reason, the Milwaukee Braves popped into my head, and she looked down, she's like, you actually got that right. Okay, but she's like, we're just kidding with you. That wasn't a real test question. We're just having fun because we see you're getting a little anxious. So that was just for fun. The real last question is, it has to be pandemic related. She's like, so this is the real question, and it's 2 parts. It's simple. If you've been, watching the news, this is a simple question. How many people died of the Spanish flu, and can you give us all their names? I'm like, all right, look, obviously I need to reschedule this appointment, and I will come back some other time or go to a different place because you don't want to do it. Fine, I get it. So if you're going to a salon or you're going to go to one of these indoor places and they have to ask you questions, you really, I think you need to start studying because they could really ask you whatever they want.